Hey folks, and welcome back to Lonely Horde Guitars. So I did a short the other day asking for input on the bridge wood for this jumbo. Choices were rosewood, koa, maple, and plum. And it was a tight race between the rosewood and the plum, but the plum took it. So today I'm going to show how I glue on one of these, how I get things centered, how I set it from here to here, how we go about clamping, all that kind of stuff. So let's get going. So first let's talk a little bit about what we've done to prep here. So the top of the guitar is pretty much sanded to 320. I will certainly make some more passes on it just to make sure there's no scratches and scuffs that we can get out. This is a sinker top, so visually it's a little bit rougher than something that, you know, didn't sit underwater for 100 years. But it's about as close as it's going to be, particularly around here in the area where we are going to be gluing. Now I have cut out and sanded the bridge, and this was done in the same style of the video that I'll link down in the description. So I have done a video on how I make these bridges. The one thing I talked about in that video but didn't actually demonstrate is sort of the final step where we made it to the top. So basically I use a little bit of sticky back sandpaper and then just sand until this is contoured to the top. So that's where we're at. All right, first thing we want to do is go ahead and find our real center line. So when we mate this neck to the body, we're pretty darn close, but we're never exactly perfect. So, or actually, sometimes we're exactly perfect, but we want to make sure. So what I do is I basically bring this ruler down to the end of the fretboard, make sure that we're aligned against the neck, and then just pick a couple spots where I'm going to mark off how far we are. So I use 24 and 28 inches for my regular scale acoustics. And we want to mark very lightly because we've already done the bulk of our sanding. We just need to get something to guide here. Something that'll easily erase off and then touch up with sand. Okay, so now we have two spots that should be equal distance from the end of the fretboard here. And we're just going to find our middle line on each of them, and then the line between those is our new center line. We did pretty good this time. At 28 inches, we are only off by the seam by about a 32nd. So this neck's actually really pretty good. So now we don't need these anymore. Let's go ahead and erase them. We'll touch up on the sanding. Now my bridge, I do have the center lines marked. So I can line up on my center line here. Okay, now we know where this needs to be positioned like this. We need to figure out exactly where it needs to be here. So I don't route my saddle slot until everything's glued, assembled, and strung up. I use a temporary brass saddle to figure out where this needs to be, and then I cut the slot for the saddle. But I do use StewMac's little tool to kind of get me in rough position. So I know that I want my slot to start about 5/30 seconds from the edge here, and it'll go across here. This kind of gives me a place to go, but this could be done with just straight up use a ruler. So that's where we want to be. Let's make sure that we are aligned like this. And this is going to be our saddle position. Just double check again that we are in a good spot. All right, maybe need to come forward just a hair. All right, this is where we want to be. So now once I've figured that out, I'm going to mark it with some tape. Tape gives me a visual indicator where I want to put my bridge, and also has a little bit of a lip so I can kind of slide into it and get a positive stop. Taping one-handed. It's kind of janky. That's the best way. Probably should have just pulled these pieces of tape off before I started laying this out. All right, now I have my position. So now I can get rid of this center line. I don't need it anymore. Now when we go to glue, we're going to use a couple of long bolts here and here to help keep the bridge from sliding around as we get everything clamped down. So we need to drill a couple of holes. I don't do the rest of the holes until everything is dry, but this is the 3/16 brad point that I use to do the initial holes for the bridge. I'm just going to go in here and give it a little spin. And that should give us a couple marks where we need to drill our holes. Use a block on the back side so we don't tear out our bridge plate. All right. Nice clean exit holes. Good to go. We hit our holes with just a little bit of sandpaper just to make sure that we don't have any stray strands that are gonna keep this from sitting flush. So now that fits in there and we won't wiggle. So next thing we have is we've got this. This is my block to give us a little bit of, you know, something to clamp onto underneath here. We want to make sure that we're going to do a dry fit basically. And what I'm looking for is, you know, does everything align? And do we have places to clamp? So here's where we're going to be using the clamp. Can I get on here? Or is there, you know, bracing in the way or something like that? So we want to make sure that we can get a good clamp before we spread glue and slap this on here. Now, the middle is never really a problem. We've got plenty of space here. It's just those outside clamps. I have a hole here I should be able to find, and I'm lined up on that one. And I'm lined up on that one. Okay. So we're good there. We're going to use that because we don't want to mar up the surface of our bridge. Okay. So that's our first clamp. Now, I would love to find some lighter clamps, something aluminum or something like this. But remember, this thing is meant to take like 150 pounds of tension. Using metal clamps that weigh a few pounds is not really a big deal. Now, the next bits we use here, these are rounded so that they don't, you know, scuff up anything. And let's just get our hand in there and feel what we've got available. And in this case, we look like we are going to be able to get onto that caul back there just fine. So that one's good. Yes, this feels good too. Okay. Sometimes, depending on the way it all comes together, I might have to take a little bit of some sticky back tape and just clamp a block to, right next to the bracing or something like that. So I'm not clamping the bracing, I'm clamping, the top and pushing up against this. And the last thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this back is nice and clean. Now this is plum, this is not particularly an oily wood, but I like to clean them anyways. But if you're doing something like, we got this Paduke, we've got this rosewood. Rosewood is going on a dreadnought baritone. This is going on a jumbo baritone. And these are very oily woods. And if I just glue and clamp, it's not going to stick. It might, but it won't stick well. So we just take a little bit of acetone, make sure that gluing surface is super clean. Acetone will help pull the oils off of it so that you will get very nice adhesion. And you can definitely feel the difference, particularly on those oily woods when you touch them before and after. All right, let's do this. Type bond original. Because if you goof it up, this is something you can actually remove with enough heat, steam, etc. Now, if you're doing something like a French polish or something like that, one of those surface mounted finishes, they tend to not put the bridge on until after the finish is done. I do penetrating oils, so I like to do it all at once. Random stick for the glue spread, random clean stick for the glue spread. This is about sort of the level of gluing that I've got going here. This is one of those things where if you happen to be a three-armed monkey, it's way easier. Okay, good spot. Okay, and then just make sure if we need to shift this any, do that before we clamp them down. You don't want it on the tape, you want it next to the tape. In fact, we will pull that off as soon as we get the ends clamped. There we go. And now that we've got that guy in place, let's pull up the tape. Okay, got a little bit of squeeze out, so we're good. We are going to let this sit now for about 15 minutes and then try and scrape up what we can get to of the squeeze out. Just pick at it a little bit with a card scraper so that we can have less to clean up later. And we are back. So I did, as mentioned, come through and scrape up the worst of the glue here, but we will take a little spray bottle and a brush and clean that up. I just use a real soft bristle toothbrush. The squeeze out will come off with just a little bit of brushing. Sometimes you may have to let it sit for just a few seconds to let the glue soften up. And we're all good. So now this guy will go on the rack to finish drying and get ready for its final sanding before finish. If this is the kind of content you like, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.